This is a story passed down through the generations, a tale of power, ambition, and the resilience of the people. What you are about to hear is not just history, but a warning, a lesson meant to be remembered. Listen closely, for this is the story of how a nation stood on the brink and fought to reclaim its soul.
The old man rocked slowly in his chair, the wooden slats creaking beneath his weight. The dim glow of the fire flickered across his weathered face as his grandson sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide with curiosity. "Grandpa," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper, "tell me about the time when the world almost changed forever." The old man let out a long sigh, his gaze drifting toward the window, where the moon hung heavy in the night sky. "Ah, that was a time of great upheaval, my boy. A time when the powerful sought to shape the world in their own image, and the people had to decide what kind of future they wanted." He leaned forward, his voice lowering to a near growl. It started with two men, Donald Trump, a leader who had once held the highest office in the land, and Elon Musk, a man who had conquered the stars with his machines. Together, they saw the workings of the government as a burden, something to be torn down and rebuilt in their own vision. The child shivered, but said nothing, hanging on his grandfather's every word. They created something they called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to make it all sound harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It was a weapon, a way to break apart everything that had been built before them. They slashed through departments like they were dead wood, sending good, honest people out into the streets. The schools suffered. The sick went without care, and those who had fought for their country found themselves abandoned. The old man's hands gripped the armrests of his chair as if he could still feel the weight of those days. And Musk, well, he wasn't just working for the government. He was working for himself. His businesses thrived while others crumbled, and every deal he made seemed to come with a piece of the country's future, wrapped up in a golden bow. He had money, power, and the ear of the most dangerous man in America. The fire crackled as the boy shifted, glancing at his grandfather with furrowed brows. But didn't anyone try to stop them? A sad smile crept across the old man's face. Oh, some tried. There were those who saw what was happening, who knew that democracy was not just a word, but a promise, one that had to be fought for. They called out the lies, they marched in the streets, and they demanded that the people in charge answer for their actions. But the machine was vast, and the men at its helm knew how to turn neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. The boy frowned, his small hands tightening into fists. That's not fair. They couldn't just take everything. The old man nodded slowly. No, they couldn't, because there was one thing they could never control. Not fully. And that was the will of the people. Oh, it took time. Too much time. But eventually, the people saw through the illusion. They remembered who they were, what they stood for, and they rose up. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean, but they took back what had been stolen. Not with violence, but with voices, with ballots instead of bullets. The boy's expression softened, though the fire of curiosity still burned in his eyes. And what happened to them? The ones who tried to take it all? The old man let out a deep breath, staring into the flames. History doesn't remember them the way they wanted, my boy. They thought they would be kings, rulers of a new world. But instead, they became a warning, a lesson for those willing to listen. The room fell into silence, the firelight casting long shadows along the walls. The boy thought for a long moment before finally speaking again. "Do you think something like that could ever happen again?" The old man's gaze met his, full of the weight of years. "It always can. That's why you must remember, and why you must tell the story when it's your turn. Because the only way to keep history from repeating itself is to never forget." The boy nodded solemnly, the flickering flames reflected in his eyes. He would remember. He would never forget.